welcome to another edition of Well Beyond the Arc. We are in episode 3. Thanks for joining us. I'm Manoli.
And I'm Montana.
And we'll be taking you through a lot of the different and hot NBA topics here as the NBA season comes to a close here on Sunday as we're recording. Just as a reminder, we are part of the Yankee and Brit Sports Group, and some housekeeping notes here before we get started. If you haven't done so, especially here on YouTube and on Spotify or Twitch, wherever you may be listening to us or watching us, please subscribe, hit that button and subscribe, and you'll get the notifications every time we put out a new episode. So very much appreciated. But without further ado, Montana, we're at last day of a very exciting NBA regular season. Playoffs are upon us, and there seems to have been a bit of a, over the past couple of years, a bit of a shift in the power dynamics between the different conferences. Traditionally, at least in the last, maybe 10 to 20 years, West has been the best. But do you think that's the case today, or have we seen a power shift?
I think we've definitely seen a power shift. First of all, when you get a star like Kevin Durant to make the switch, we've seen a lot of big name stars make the switch. Obviously, DeRozan was in the East, then he went to the West, and now he's back in the East. And arguably, he was big on the Raptors, but he's a bigger face now, I'd say, in the Eastern Conference. So we're seeing these stars make the switch. So I think the biggest power swap has been the players that have swapped over the conferences. Also, we cannot forget LeBron James ran the East. LeBron James kind of ran the East, at least close towards the end. Him and that Cavs team kind of dominated. It was kind of Cavs versus whoever wins the West, which was unfortunately mostly the Warriors for that stretch of time. So I think that the swapping of players, at first it kind of balanced it out. LeBron went to the West. It kind of balanced the conferences, gave other teams more of a chance in the East. And then these stars started switching over. And then it was like, okay, East-West more even. And now the East arguably is the more competitive, close, powerful conference. And the thing that makes me think that more than anything else is we look at the top 8 teams in the East, and the Cavs are currently sitting 8th. They're 43 and 38. Well, we're looking in the Western Conference, in the 8th seed, 8 through 10 is like, low 40s to high 30s. The Lakers record right now, 32-49. They'd be 13th in the East, and they're 11th in the West by a pretty good margin over the Kings. So the East is becoming the conference where we're seeing more teams compete and get, 40-plus win seasons. And before that Eastern Conference, a lot of 30, I granted high 30, seasons, but a lot of 30, win seasons made the playoffs in the East. Yeah. Now we're seeing top 8 is all 40. So I would say the East is definitely becoming the better conference. And I think in the future, we will also see some more stars from West to East flop. I think those markets are also growing quite a bit. And I think the East is starting to take over. So, obviously the West, we still have the LeBrons, the Currys, we still have, the Bookers, the CP3s. We have the big names. But the East may have more relevant stars that are choosing to play there and that are pretty young. DeRozan has some time left. So we could see him in the East on that Bulls team or wherever for a good amount of time. So I think the East is definitely on the rise, if not already a step above the West at this point.
Yeah. I grew up in the 90s. I grew up with the 90s Bulls, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen era Bulls. And I'll get to LeBron and the effect I think he's had in the power shift here in a second. But even back in the 90s, early 90s, there was a lot of really, really good Eastern Conference teams. You had a lot of 50-win teams, 1 through 5. You had the Bulls. The Knicks were a consistent team there within the Patrick Ewing era. You had teams, especially when Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway, and Pat Riley went to the Heat and became a contender there in the mid to late 90s. They were a perennial powerhouse. You had some good Atlanta Hawks teams. You had Reggie Miller and the Pacers over there. The East had a good at least 1 through 5 consistently through the 90s. But even in the 90s, you saw a lot of power shift, especially when Shaq left Orlando to go over to the Lakers. And that's when a lot of folks wanted, hey, I want to go play out West, go play in warmer weather. I mean, would you rather, in the middle of January, would you rather play in New Jersey, or would you rather be in LA or Oakland where the Warriors were, or Phoenix. I mean, that's a big thing. Or would you rather be in Minnesota, or would you rather be somewhere in a warmer climate and things of that nature? So, and I think another piece of it where it happened in the 90s. It happened early on when Shaq went from Orlando to LA, but it also happened with LeBron going from Cleveland to Miami and then to the LA. I think some stars try to go to an opposite conference to avoid some of these top guys because I think they see an easier path to the finals. Not every year, because then you have teams like the Warriors that you want to avoid, and it can have the opposite effect, and maybe that's what's happening now. But I think one thing that's happened over the past 20, 30 years is some guys, it's a combination of avoiding that top dog to get at least give them a better chance of getting to the finals and then letting the chips fall where they may, and then kind of going from there. So it's happened, especially in the last few years with LeBron switching conferences for sure. Generally guys like playing in warm weather, but warm weather also occurs in Miami and Orlando. Now, Orlando's a doormat right now. They got a young team, and they got a bunch of nice pieces that they're putting together. But it's going to take them a couple of years to be a contender. Maybe in a year or two, they attract a star free agent, mix them with those young guys, and say, hey, we got some warm weather here. I mean, we got Florida. Come play with us. But guys are going to Miami. They're going to that heat culture as well. I mean, you got Jimmy Butler there. We talked about him previously. I mean, Kyle Lowry decided to go down and sign there in the offseason. They got a good team. So you mentioned Durant. You mentioned DeRozan. There's just a log jam, in the East right now. I mean, even looking 2 through 4, you got Milwaukee just solidified their spot as second in the West here, or I'm sorry, second in the East, excuse me. Then you have Boston and Philly duking it out today in their respective games for the 3rd and 4th seed. I mean, before you used to say, all the teams in the West are going to duke it out and they're going to get the chance to play, LeBron or MJ. Now it's everybody in the West or East is going to duke it out and, see who plays out, comes out of the West. It could be Phoenix. It could be Memphis. It could be, anybody out in the West. So there's definitely been a power shift over the past few years.
And we're seeing it, especially I think this season, we've seen it. It's been kind of on the rise. But this season, I mean, and this is a little bit of a hot take. We won't go into it too much, but I don't have a lot of Western Conference teams beating some of those top teams in the East in a 7-game series. I mean, the East, we've got the Heat, we've got, Milwaukee, we've got the 76ers, we've got even throw the Celtics in there. We've got some teams that would give a lot of these Western Conference teams a problem in a 7-game series. So I think the East is definitely on the rise, and I think some of these teams, specifically, the Miami is really starting to get kind of more attention again. They kind of went from being the team to back to, they're still Miami, they're still the Heat, but they're not the Heat, and now they're starting to kind of attract those names to become, and even the Bulls. I mean, of course, still not so much a warm place all year round, but it's a team that's attracting more people, like more stars and more attraction.
It's warm here for about a month. It's either too cold or too hot here, but enjoy summer while it lasts. But no, I mean, look, you mentioned some of the records here. I mean, just to show the strength, just in the records here. I mean, if we look at the East, you alluded to it a minute ago, but 1 through 10, and I go to 10 because it's to catch the 9 and 10 seeds that are going to be playing 7 and 8 for the play-in here coming in the next couple of days. I mean, you have even Charlotte right now at the 10th seed at 42 and 39. I mean, most years that's an 8 seed in either conference, maybe even a 7 seed. But even the play-in tournament with Brooklyn, Cleveland, Atlanta, and Charlotte, they're just separated by a game between those 4. And from a play-in standpoint, I think it's Brooklyn's to lose coming out of there, but that's going to be just a play-in tournament from those 4 teams is going to be exciting. Then you go over to the West. The Clippers are starting to get healthy here. They got Paul George back. There's rumors about Kawhi, starting to train and possibly coming back. I personally don't see it.
I don't.
But then you have New Orleans Pelicans 36 and 45. I mean, that's a lottery team number. And then you have San Antonio, who they beat up on the Lakers just to get up the 10th seed. 47 losses. That's not a playoff team, but because the NBA decided to expand to 10 seeds for that play-in tournament, giving teams like that a chance. But I mean, the East's gonna to beat up on each other. Speaking of the play-in, who do you see Montana coming out. Let's start with the West. Who do you
Mm-hmm.
see as the two teams coming out of that play-in tournament and qualifying for the playoffs, the big
So
boy playoffs?
it's tricky to it's so for me the West is harder to see. For me the West is a lot more even in those teams that are going to be playing. We've got the Timberwolves, Clippers, Pelicans, Spurs. There's not a lot of difference between those teams. I definitely don't see the Spurs. I don't see the Spurs or Pelicans. I'm not going to lie. I can see it being Timberwolves and Clippers as it is now. Um, Clippers are a way better team than what their record shows, and I think they're going to really come alive in the plan. And Paul George is still a bucket. People really disrespect Paul George, and I've done a bit of it myself since he's a Clipper and not a Laker. I've done a bit Paul George slander myself, but I respect him quite a bit. He's obviously a very successful and long lasting career despite that terrible injury that he suffered. But I definitely have it being Clippers, Timberwolves. East East is tough, but I have it being the Nets and the Hawks. I have Nets, Hawks, potentially. I don't. That Cavs team is strong, and they're way better off than I thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. But I think there'll be a team that gets bounced this time, and then they figure it out and come back next season. And they're not even in the play, and they're a top 6 team. That's
Okay.
how I see the Cavs being. But it's really hard to say. And then you have to also think about how the play-in games are going to be scheduled, who plays who. Those matchups also are important to look at, just the games themselves. So the East, I'd say it's anyone's game. The West, I don't see the Pelicans or the Spurs really being able to compete against teams like the Clippers and the Timberwolves. But the East is a little closer because I can see the Hawks, making a push. I can see the Hornets making a push. I think that like you said, it's the Nets to lose. The Nets by far are the team that I see making it, and then right behind them, it's kind of close. But I could see Nets Hornets or Nets Hawks, but I don't see the Cavs making it this go round.
Okay. I have similar thoughts, but just to kind of reset how the play-in works, I just wanted to make sure I double checked it. So how it works, the first game is the 7th versus the 8th seed in both conferences. Then you have the 9 and the 10 seed playing each other. So the winner of the 7-8 game is the 7th seed. The winner of the 9 and 10 game plays the loser of the 7-8 game for the 8th seed. So we'll start over in the West. Minnesota has had a great year. First time they've made the playoffs in I don't even know how many years. Probably the second time they've made the playoffs since Kevin Garnett left Minnesota. They did make the playoffs a few years back.
Once with
Jimmy
D-Rose,
Butler.
I think in 2018.
Yeah, it was D Rose. The Bulls reunion up in Minnesota with Jimmy Butler, Tibbs, Taj Gibson, those guys alongside Cat. But this will be the second time, it's since Kevin Garnett left and was traded to the Celtics in 2007. So I think it should be Minnesota and the Clippers coming out as a 7-8 seed. But I fully expect the Clippers to be in that top 8. I see the Clippers winning, especially now getting Paul George back. That makes a huge difference. He is a professional scorer. Looks healthy. Looks good ever since he's come back from that elbow injury. So I fully expect the Clippers to be there. Minnesota has to be careful. They have a young, uber talented team with Karl Anthony Towns. Probably in the front runner probably in the running, for one of those All NBA teams. Probably more like a third team, maybe even the second. But you have that young second-year guard, that stud Anthony Edwards, who just had a game the other night where he put in 49, called himself a bucket, just like Jalen Green did to the Rockets. But if Minnesota, who's young and inexperienced outside of Patrick Beverley, mind you, who one of our favorite players for the All-Pest team, if Minnesota loses that first game to the Clippers, watch out, because there's going to be a lot of pressure on that young team to make sure they take care of business against the loser of the 9 and 10 game. I'm with you. I don't see the Pelicans or Spurs. That's not my prediction. I wouldn't put money on either one of those teams making the top 8, but I could see a scenario where the Pelicans can sneak in if Minnesota loses that first game, because that puts a lot of pressure on the Minnesota Pelicans matchup. I can completely see the Pelicans. I wouldn't be shocked if the Pelicans beat Minnesota to get in. So, but I have right now, if you had to have me put money on it, I'd say it's Minnesota and Clippers with the Pelicans as a sleeper in the West. In the East, yeah, I think it's anybody's game too. But I definitely think Brooklyn will come out. Especially with Kyrie Irving now eligible to play home games. You have Kevin Durant who's healthy. Andre Drummond and Seth Curry have been great additions for that team, just providing additional depth that they needed. Ben Simmons is going to continue to be a no-show. More on that in future shows and things like that. But I think if I'm in the East, if I'm that Miami or Milwaukee, I want no part of Brooklyn. I don't. Or Milwaukee has been able to beat Brooklyn a couple of times this year. But those would be very interesting first-round matchups, whether it's Miami taking on Brooklyn or Milwaukee. That's going to be really tough. That's going to be must-see TV. But definitely have Brooklyn. As far as those other three teams, Atlanta, Charlotte, and Cleveland. Cleveland's definitely overachieved with that young squad. They put together, a pretty good squad with, we mentioned it a show or two ago with Lauri Markkanen, former Bull. JB Bickerstaff's done a hell of a job coaching that team. Kobe Altman's done a good job of putting together some interesting pieces. I mean, used to have twin towers back in the day with David Robinson and Tim Duncan and some other teams that had 2 7-footers. But there's a scenario here where, a lot of times Cleveland plays 3 of those guys with Evan Mobley, Kevin Love, Jarrett Allen, Lauri Markkanen. Yeah, they have 4 guys that are like 6'10", 6'11", 7 feet that they can play it on any time.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't missed Colin Sexton much, but I think Cleveland's inexperience is going to hurt them. I think they haven't been playing well going into this play-in and playoffs, so I see Cleveland on the outside looking in just like you do. I'm going to provide a mini hot take, and I'm going to say Charlotte gets in. With LaMelo Ball and that leading that squad, they've just been an exciting team to watch. They've been pretty consistent, hovering around that 500 mark all year. And selfishly, I want to see LaMelo Ball get in. And they get that Charlotte team into the playoffs. So I have Charlotte and the Brooklyn Nets coming out of the East. So that's my play-in tournament picks.
And yeah, it's really the East, like the West, it's a little more, you can kind of see how that might be, but the West is really, the East is really anyone's game, except obviously the Nets, it's theirs to lose. We can definitely agree on, because they shouldn't even be in the play-in. I mean, and I know they've had their fair share of stuff this season, but regardless of the Cavs make or not, respect to them. This time last year, they were the 13th seed and they were 22-50. They turned it around, and they are a 40-win team, and that is one of the best turnarounds that I've seen from a team from year to year in the last. And then there's the Knicks, who were a playoff team, and now they're back down to the Knicks. So we've seen a couple teams shift, but no, I definitely think the play-in tournament itself is going to be a really exciting, and I think a little closer than last year's play-in tournament. We had the Warriors, the Lakers. It was a little bit. The Wizards on the other side of this. The Hornets were there too last year. So it's definitely a different feel this year. I think it's going to be a lot closer, at least in the East. And
Sure.
Who knows? Maybe the West will see some surprises, and maybe the Spurs or the Pelicans. I can say between the Spurs and Pelicans, like you said, I can see the Pelicans being that sleeper team. Spurs were not even looking into making the plan, come All-Star break. And then they saw, the Lakers are losing 10, 12, 13 games. We can do this. And then they rallied and got that 10th seed, and rightfully so. They put on a show the second half of the season, really.
Sure. Yeah, the Lakers were like, well, you guys, here's the way to the playing game. Just here, take this road, go right ahead. Stay, right this way,
Pretty
guys.
much.
So
yeah, open the door for them.
From teams that we're talking about whether or not they're even going to make the playoffs to playoff sleepers. We've been talking about the 7 through 10 seeds right now in both the East and the West. There's been a lot of talk about the Miami Heat, the 2 through 4 seeds in the East. You have Phoenix in the West, that's overall top record in the NBA right now. But a lot of talk. The Golden State Warriors aren't going anywhere either. But who do you see, Montana, as a sleeper team you want to keep your eye on in both conferences?
So for the West, Denver Nuggets. That Denver team is really, really scary. It used to be like, Jokic, Murray, like they had a couple select guys that were really like pretty talented, and then just kind of a little band around them that was not great, but some pretty good, role players. But that Denver team has kind of boosted themselves from a team with a really big star and then a good supporting character and then an okay supporting cast to, even with, Murray being out, a star in Jokic, who just had an amazing, Jokic had an incredible season. Last
Sure.
season, I wasn't, super set on the whole MVP thing. Arguably, this season, I think he deserves it more than he did before, just because he had himself a really, really solid season, and it wasn't really covered that much as well. Like, he was putting up pretty big numbers, and I didn't see a lot of stuff about him in the media. And certain points, yes, but I think that Denver Nugget team could be a team that could give a lot of these teams a run for their money in the West. So my pick for a sleeper team in the West is definitely the Nuggets. They're sitting right now 48-33, most likely 49-33 after tonight's game against the Lakers. You never know, but that's most likely the realistic outcome of that game. So I definitely think the Denver Nuggets will give a lot of these teams a run for their money. Because, yeah, we've got the Suns, the Grizzlies, the Warriors, the Mavs, that takes the top four spots. But any of those teams could be beat, especially by a team where Jokic runs the. I mean, he is like the biggest point guard I've ever seen. That's how I would say, because some of his
7-foot point
passes.
guard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
7-foot point guard. You got a 7-foot point guard. I mean, he really does it all. And with some of the pieces they moved around and some of the pieces they brought back have really meshed into a really solid West team that we haven't heard a lot about, but I think we will hear a lot about them in the playoffs. So for me, for the West, I've got the Nuggets. For the East, I've got the Raptors. Um, the Raptors are a team, they're currently fifth, 48-33. So solid record. They're an 8-2 in the last 10 games. They're really showing out towards the end of the season. Another team that didn't get a great start. I will say they turned it around before All-Star break, obviously, but for the first 15 to 20 games, they really looked like a bottom, maybe playing, maybe
Yeah.
below team. And now they've really, they're a
Sure.
fifth seed now. So I think that they're a team that is really well rounded. Had Kawhi stayed with them, we would be looking at a team that would probably be in the top three since he got there, just because that Raptors team with Kawhi was different. You had a really solid team, but they've really bounced back. Obviously, they lose Kyle Lowry as well, Raptors
Sure.
legend, but they've really bounced back, and they've got a pretty good mix. They've got a young squad with a lot of talent, but they also have some, mid to vet players that kind of help keep the flow going. So I think that
Siakam,
Raptors
Van
team,
Fleet. Yeah.
yep, they've got those players that know what it takes to win. Plus, you have that young talent that's hungry for it. So I've got the Raptors making some noise in the East. So my top sleepers are the Nuggets in the West and the Raptors in the East.
Well, originally I had both of those teams written down as my sleeper teams, but I'm not going to be boring. I'm gonna go with some different teams. I'm gonna make some arguments for a couple of different teams here. I would even argue in the West, and I think those are great picks, Montana. I think you know Jokic very well could win his second MVP season. Mike Malone's a hell of a coach, and with losing not having Jamal Murray for the
Mm-hmm.
entire season, losing Michael Porter Jr. who's hurt, but they've continued to chug along, led by Jokic. They have a lot of good young pieces there. Even Will the Thrill Barton, a second vet there, if you will. They can make some noise, but I'm I would make an argument that despite being the second seed, the Memphis Grizzlies are a bit of a sleeper because I don't think they're talked about enough. And we're going to give them some love later on in the show here today. But for me, my sleeper team in the West is going to be the Dallas Mavericks. Now, how confident am I in that sleeper team from a scale of 1 to 10? 4. but I'm going to go with them anyway. I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of Luka Doncic. He's turned it on in the second half of the season. He probably wasn't in the greatest shape in the first half, but he's really turned it on here. And some of the moves the Mavericks made at the trade deadline have made them better and have given Luka Doncic some more toys to play with, if you will, some more tools. The addition of Spencer Dinwiddie. Even Davis Bertans, shooters like that. I mean, you still have Tim Hardaway. He's one of those guys, Luka, that he can drive and dish and find open shooters. And as long as those, he's got shooters that can knock him down, they got a shot. And I picked the Mavericks too because they got one of my favorite players in the NBA, Mr. Boban Marjanovic. Is he the best player in the NBA? No, but I think the dude's hilarious. 7'3", 7'4", doesn't even have to jump to dunk. Love him in all his commercials. And, if you guys like Boban Marjanovic, make sure you do some YouTube scouting on him. He's got some funny stuff out there. But funny stuff doesn't get you to the NBA Finals. But I do think that the Mavericks could make a little bit of noise. I don't see them going too far just because there's some other stronger teams there. Like if they run into, right now, I think they're the 4th seed. if they win their first round matchup, they'd hit matchup with Phoenix, and I don't see them getting past Phoenix. But if Phoenix isn't healthy, they got a shot. I mean, so I'm gonna even though I had Denver before, I'm gonna say that Dallas is my sleeper team coming out of the West. In the East, my heart tells me to pick the Bulls, but my brain says no. They're going to have a short stay. They're going to have a short stay. So I'm not going to go with the Bulls. You mentioned the Raptors. Not going to go with the Raptors, even though I completely agree with you on all your points. And Nick Nurse is a hell of a coach. I am going to go with the Boston Celtics. We talked about the Celtics a little bit last week. There's been a lot of pub recently about the 76ers, about, is James Harden fitting in there with that team, and Joel Embiid literally carrying them on his back. He just recently clinched the scoring title, so congrats to him at 30.6 points per game. But I'm going to go with the Celtics. They're hot right now. They were, like we said last week, they were 19-21 at one point. They're going to finish. They have 50 wins right now. They might finish it with a 51-31 record. We'll see whether or not they're going to be a 3 or 4 seed. But like I mentioned last week, they have a lot of guys that are within between 6'6" and 6'9" that are long, can defend, can shoot, and be interchangeable. So even if one of those guys go out, now granted, as long as one of those guys isn't Jason Tatum or Brown, I think that the Celtics will be fine, and they've seemed to gel better here, especially with the addition of Derek White coming off the bench. That's an upgrade from having Dennis Schroeder earlier in the year. The way the game is played right now, drive and dish, or just move the ball until you get an open 3-pointer, and the Celtics have plenty of those guys, and they're a little bit deeper now. Getting Daniel Tice back, like I mentioned last week as well, I see the Celtics as a sleeper. So right now I have my sleeper teams are the Dallas Mavericks and Boston Celtics.
And those are solid sleeper teams. I think honestly, any team. I think the West. It's tricky because the Suns have dominated so much. I think the Suns are looked at as the clear-cut favorite as of now. So even the Warriors team, they're not a sleeper, but any team that's not the Suns, because the Suns 64 wins, 17 losses. That's the best record in the NBA. They're the team that's definitely looked at on top. So any team behind them is probably not given the same notoriety. Like last season, it was a little closer in the West. It was a little bit closer, I would say, by a bit. Last year, Jazz were the first seed, 52 wins. Suns were the second seed with 51 wins, and the Nuggets had 47. So we weren't seeing a team that had that many wins up ahead of the next seed. So it's definitely a different, more dominative season for the Suns that put them in that position. But Mavs, I can see them being a team that can make some noise, and same with the Celtics. So it's going to be a fun playoffs, and we're definitely going to see some sleeper teams that we mentioned probably perform pretty well.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but other than the first round of the NCAA tournament, the March Madness, the opening weekend of the NBA playoffs is one of the more exciting times of the year, at least for me, just because you have at least 3 or 4 playoff games in a day. Everybody's playing in that first round. There's some exciting matchups, and there's nothing like playoff basketball. Absolutely nothing like it. Very, very intense. And speaking of intense, we mentioned his name a minute ago. Maybe there's one particular all-star that needs to turn down his intensity just a little bit when it comes to the officials. Luka Doncic nearly got a 1-game suspension for getting his 16th technical a couple days ago, earlier this week. And the NBA has a rule: you get 16 technicals in a season, you sit out a game. That's an automatic 1-game suspension. Gone are the days where Rasheed Wallace gets 37 technicals in a season and things like that. It's the NBA's effort to help clean up the game and not have, their telecast full of guys just complaining to the ref, even though they still complain to the ref. But Doncic did avoid suspension. The NBA did rescind his 16th technical, so he's still stuck with 15 and will be able to play today. In your opinion, Montana, is Luka Doncic slowly developing a reputation for being a bit of a whiner?
So here's my take on that. I think Luka obviously has played professional basketball before he came to the U.S. He's been playing pro basketball since he was pretty young, and he was playing. There's some pictures I've seen and some clips of him playing up against the big boys when he was not quite there yet. So he has been playing professional basketball for a lot of his young late teen, young adult life. So he's seen a different league. He's seen a different thing. And I will say, I think he also does, I would say he gets targeted by some players. I think Luka is a player that is so different. That's my player that I think is like going to become the face of the league eventually. He
Yeah,
is so special. And I think with that there might be a little bit of he doesn't have a target on his back, but I think he does a little bit. I think he has a target on his back, and I think his intensity that he brings from the overseas basketball, plus also he's not dumb. He probably knows that certain players might be out to get him, or they know that because of who he is, how special he is. So I really think that I don't think he's a whiner. I think he is just having a lot that he has to deal with on that court from all areas of the field. The other team, the rest, overall. Now, I will say he's had a couple outbursts and things throughout the season where it, it didn't look great. But I
sure.
think the pressure and just the position that he is kind of rising up to is maybe giving him more of a target on his back, not just from players, also officials. I mean, we can't. The ref in the NBA is always going a little bit down, in my opinion, just with certain things they call. I'll be like, well, was that really worth stopping the game for? But I
Sure.
think there's a combination of things that are adding on to that. But I don't think he's exactly. I wouldn't say he's a whiner, and I wouldn't say that he's like gaining that face. But I definitely think that where he is kind of boosting his career and his face in the NBA too is maybe giving him more of a bad rep and also bringing more things that might be overwhelming to him. Because he's not that old either. This
No,
is still a
no.
guy that's he's not much older than me. I'm 21. He's not. I don't even know how old is Luka. Is he?
He's 23. Just looked it up.
I
23
mean,
years old.
he's 23 years old. So
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of factors playing into maybe that thought of him being a whiner, but I don't think he's an actual whiner because he goes out
Yeah.
there and he does it and he puts on a show, and he's a huge reason this Mavs team is where they are this
Sure.
season and
Sure.
overall. So I would say no. I would say that there's a
Okay.
lot of factors that I'd mentioned that might be playing into that, but an actual like whiner, I don't think so. But is he getting that face in the league with all those factors potentially?
So I'll agree with you. I don't think he's a whiner. And there's a lot of good points you brought up. I mean, again, everybody has to remember he's 23 years old. Um, and these guys are playing professional basketball, very intense. I mean, I'm not going to claim that I've ever been close to that high of a level, but even playing in a competitive pickup game, I mean, emotions are high.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it's a close game or, you think you got fouled, I can understand guys going and saying, complaining on a non-call, especially to a ref. I get that. But I think that Luka has to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
Guys that, are leading the league in technical fouls, not necessarily from a reputation standpoint among fans and things like that. I think when people hear our podcast, they're going to be even surprised that we're even asking the question. But I think he needs to be careful with the officials.
Mm-hmm.
I think some officials they hold grudges. They'll never say they do. I mean, ask Tim Donaghy for all we know. But one of those things, he definitely wants to be careful. He doesn't want to gain that reputation with the officials come playoff
Mm-hmm.
time. But another thing is, he's a different kind of player, like you said. He's a 6'7", essentially 6'7" point guard, and plays a different game. A lot of these guys, like that are one-offs, if you will. I don't know how else to
Mm-hmm.
put it, but a 6'7" point guard. That's what that can just be physical, not take guys off the dribble. I mean, Luka has the ability to do that, but he's not exactly fleet of foot. He's more quick than fast. But guys like that are guarded by smaller players, sometimes they're officiated a little differently. Shaq, completely dominant. I'm sure he got fouled 180 times a game and was only called, maybe half a dozen times, maybe 10 times, whatever. Those guys are officiated differently. The Giannis Antetokounmpos are, officiated differently. One guy that I will say also needs to be careful is one Nikola Jokic, and we've
Mm-hmm.
seen a couple outbursts from him, especially in the Nuggets last playoff game. Now I'm all for showing emotion, especially during the playoffs. It's a great time. I mean, emotions are high. Everybody's playing for a championship, but you have to remember time and place and not put your team in jeopardy of losing because you decided that to have a bit of an outburst and get thrown out of a game. And I think, I don't think he's getting that reputation either, but he's one of those guys that I'll be watching for in the playoffs. And hopefully, there aren't any altercations. We see him on the court and we'll be able to continue and then see play out how the series will go with a full squad. So, well, from guys that we may think are whiners to a new game that everyone is talking about, and what I mean by everyone, myself and Montana, we're going to our second ever installment of NBA Player Or is here. So last week we played NBA Player Or, and the topic was NBA Player or European Politician. And I did my best to stump Montana, but he surprised everyone by getting 4 out of 5 right. So hopefully I've made it a little more difficult for you today. But today, the topic is NBA Player or TV Weatherman. And the weatherman can be from anywhere in the country. So, Montana, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm hoping to keep the streak alive. I'm at 4 streak. About to try to add 5 more to it. So let's see what I can do. But it's I don't. This one might stump me a little bit more than the last one did.
Okay. Now, remember, the NBA player, or it could be a current NBA player, could be a prior NBA player. Same with these weathermen, but I'll give you one hint today. As far as I know, all of the weathermen are current weathermen in their respective cities. So
perfect.
Let's see how you do. All right, sir.
Get right into it.
Number 1, NBA player or TV weatherman. The first name is Don Mclean. Don Mclean.
I'm going to start off with TV weatherman.
Don Mclean played in the NBA from 1992. He played in the NBA from 1992 to 2001. Great sound effect and visual there from Jay. Thanks, Jay. In fact, Don Mclean was the 1993-94 NBA Most Improved Player. He played with a number of teams. Washington Bullets, Denver Nuggets, Philadelphia 76ers, New Jersey Nets, Seattle Supersonics, Phoenix Suns, and Miami Heat. Yes, I agree. That sounds like a name of a TV weatherman. But
that's
unfortunately,
what I can see that right there on that screen right now with that weatherman. But I started with missed one last time. And I got 4 in a row, so just got to bounce back. But yeah, that one could have gone either way. But I was thinking, I feel like that's a weatherman. I feel like that has to be, but I guess not.
All right, 0 for 1. But hey, listen, you missed the first one last week and you swept the rest of them. So let's see how you do the rest of the way. All right, the second name, and I just realized I went out of order, but that's okay. Second name is Tom Skilling. Tom Skilling, is he an NBA player or a TV weatherman?
I'm going to trust my gut and go with TV weatherman.
Tom Skilling is a TV weatherman for WGN TV here in Chicago. He has been here for forever and a day. You want a little bit of a chuckle? Victory! There you go. There's the chuckle. Thank you, Johnny Drama. Google I'm effing Tom Skilling, and there's some fun that the WGN crew pokes fun at the longtime TV man, Tom Skilling. So, all right, Montana, 1 for 1. Let's see if we can keep it going here. The next name that I'm going to give you is Eddie Robinson. Eddie Robinson, is he an NBA player or a TV weatherman?
Eddie Robinson. Oh, man. I'm going to take a little switch, and I'm going to go with NBA player.
Victory! Eddie Robinson played in the NBA from 1999 to 2004 with the Charlotte Hornets and my Chicago Bulls. I don't miss Eddie Robinson. He wasn't that good here, but he averaged 7 points a game for his career. And I think the most he accomplished in the NBA was having a really cool headband in every game he played in. But yes, you are correct, sir.
I think, and the whole reason I kind of got that was on an old 2K game on one of like the classic teams. I think one of those Hornets teams might have been on there, and I think I've seen him through that before. So I was kind of not just guessing, but it could go either way, honestly. So yeah, off to a bad start, but now we're on the up now. So keep it going. All right, get that streak.
Two for 3, folks. All right.
There we go.
The next name Is this person an NBA player or TV weatherman? The name is Chris Cimino. Chris Cimino, NBA player or TV weatherman?
I'm really going with the last names on these. That's what I'm listening for is the last names, and I'm thinking Cimino. I think that's a weatherman.
Victory!
Chris Cimino is a weatherman for WNBC in New York. At least he was as of 2019. But yes, you are correct, sir. All right, Montana, just like last week, rallying. We might start calling you the comeback kid, sir. Well done. All right. The fifth and final name. Is this person an NBA player or TV weatherman? The name is Cedric Haynes. Cedric Haynes. Is he a NBA player or TV weatherman?
I'm going to go with NBA player.
Oh, so close. Cedric Haynes is a weatherman for WYFF in Greenville, South Carolina. That's probably the toughest one and kind of the meanest one. But good showing from you here today, Montana. Again, getting the majority here, 3 out of 5 here. So you're 7 for 10 here over the past 2 weeks. We'll keep a tally, and every week here going forward on Well Beyond the Arc, we'll be playing NBA player and we'll be testing Montana's trivial knowledge to see if he recognizes whether that person is an NBA player or someone in another profession. So well done, sir. I still got to give you a clap.
Thank you.
Props for 3 out of 5.
At least I'm not 0 for 5 yet. I haven't had one where I've missed all of them, so that's a good thing.
No, doing much better than Charles Barkley and who he played for. Well, from giving love to Montana to giving love to a team that probably hasn't been talked about enough despite their success this season, and that's the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis Grizzlies are entrenched in the number 2 seed in the West, currently at 56-25 as they're entering play here on the last day of the season. Memphis Grizzlies were qualified as a 8 seed in last year's playoffs to take on the Utah Jazz and played a very exciting series against the Jazz. But if anyone told you that they thought that the Memphis Grizzlies were going to be the 2 seed in the West, I would call that person a liar. So Montana, let's give some love to the Memphis Grizzlies, and rightfully so. I mean, do you see them making noise in the playoffs, and what do you like about this team?
So I definitely see them making noise in the playoffs. I see them being a team that really deserves their seeding. You know, we see some teams like switching over to the East just really quick, 76ers. Yeah, you know, they're highly seeded, but do they really deserve that seeding playoff-wise? Will they really play like a 3 seed? Same thing with the Jazz. They've got decent seeding, but we've also seen them kind of be on the down. So the Memphis Grizzlies deserve where they're seated at, and I see them going head-to-head the entire NBA. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them in the conference finals. I really wouldn't be surprised if we see them come conference final time. So they definitely are a team that I see going far in the playoffs. I will say if they made it to the finals, it might be a little tough to watch. We might get the brooms out against some of those Eastern Conference teams, but I do think that they'll make it pretty far. And the thing I love most about this team is, yeah, Ja Morant, amazing player. But some of those other players on that team, even when he's been out a few times with injuries, you know, minor, but he's had some injury exits this season throughout the season.
Oh yeah.
But when he's not playing, they're still winning. They're still winning games. So all across the board, we're seeing a team that I think that this Grizzlies team is going to take the Western Conference over. Yes, we talk about the Warriors, the Suns, the Lakers. Hopefully, will make some changes and be back on top next season. We see all these bigger name teams, but the Memphis Grizzlies have been on the rise, and we've seen them gradually build up every season for the last few seasons. They've been quiet about it, but now they have Ja Morant, and you can't be quiet about a player like Ja Morant. I mean, that guy is
absolutely not
incredible. Yes, he's had some hits of the injury bug pretty early in his career, but I mean, some of the stuff that guy does, how could he not have some injuries? I mean, that he is doing some insane things on the court, and I think that this Grizzlies team is going to become the face of the West maybe even as soon as next season, especially if they have a successful playoff run. So this Memphis team has been so fun to watch. That Memphis fan base is amazing. I love that fan base. I got a couple buddies down there that just have been with them through the bad and good years, and now it's like so exciting to see them on the rise. So I think this
Yeah,
Memphis team is the real deal.
yeah,
I really think they're the real deal, and I think going forward they'll be even more the real deal within the next few seasons. Memphis, not a huge market, but with how this team has been on the rise, I wouldn't be shocked if we see some bigger names looking and maybe going there come free agency or trade. So I think we could see Memphis maybe get a couple star players that get interested in that team because of how quickly they've kind of been on the rise. And again, they've been quiet about it, but they've been every season bump a little more, and then now they're the number 2 seed. And from 8 to 2, that jump
mhm,
is impressive. I mean, it kind of
sure.
reminds me of the Phoenix Suns. They
Where's the
jumped
first? Yeah,
from, yeah. And so we're seeing these teams that, usually we scoff at and like, oh, if, see them on the schedule, it's like, oh, easy win. But that's not the case anymore. This Memphis team is the real deal. So
yeah,
fun to watch, too.
yeah.
Highlight team.
No, I agree, and John Morant, MVP candidate. But
Mhm.
we talked about MVPs a couple weeks ago. I dinged him because he hasn't been healthy enough.
Mhm.
He's only played in 57 games. Missed 24, 25 games, and the team at one point was 18-2 without him. I don't know what their exact record is in all 24, 25 games they missed, but 18-2 without the guy, that just shows how deep they are. And they are a
Mhm.
young core. I think, their vet, I mentioned Steven Adams, the veteran center that played with New Orleans last year, and previously to that was, a longtime member of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Um, Defense and rebounding in the middle, doesn't need the ball to score, things of that
Mhm.
nature. He does all the dirty work. Perfect for a team like this that has shooters and things like that. I mean, obviously you want John Morant, you want your best players playing. And if John
Mhm.
Morant, who's back here in time for the playoffs, remains healthy, I think the Grizzlies can make some noise. But
Mhm.
even if he's not 100% or, they miss him for some time during the playoffs, I think they have a shot. We talk about big threes all the time, but I just looked them up here. They have 3 guys averaging at least 18 points a game. They have John Morant, obviously at 27.4, but they have who I think is either the front runner or the second place person for most improved player of the year behind Tyler Hero, um, is Desmond Bain. Desmond
Mhm.
Bain, great defender, great shooter, pick up out of nowhere out of TCU. I think I mentioned that a couple weeks ago also. They have Dylan Brooks averaging 18 points a game. I know he's been out for quite a while with injuries, but he's back now. Jaren Jackson Jr., 6'9", 6'10", big, that can shoot, athletic, can defend, clean up the glass. DeAnthony Melton, a number of guys. This team is just deep. They're young. I don't know if I agree about them being a free agent destination unless you're throwing ribs from Rendezvous at those free agent meetings. And if you're ever in Memphis, make sure you hit up Rendezvous. Some of the best ribs I've ever had. But I think this team can make some noise this year. You got to take advantage of the team or advantage of that opportunity being a 2 seed and how weak the West is compared to the East. I think they'll make it to the Western Conference Finals and find the Phoenix Suns there. I don't know what will happen after that yet, but it will be exciting to see. Um, take advantage of the team and how everything's set up now. If free agents decide to go to Memphis, great. I don't think that's necessarily the destination like an LA or a Phoenix or even a Golden State, but maybe guys will want to go join that young core and go from there. Or you might find something where let's say the Grizzlies don't make it as far in the playoffs this year, and in the offseason, maybe they package a couple of those young pieces and trade for another superstar, and that puts them over the hump. But right now, I think they're sitting pretty. I think they're going to make it far, and it'll be exciting time here for the Memphis Grizzlies in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And I'm with you on that. I think I definitely see them having a chance at that Western Conference final and going toe to toe with whoever they play.
Yeah,
Whoever they meet up in that final, they're going to go full 7 game. We're not going to see a sweep. Memphis, no matter where they exit in this playoffs, are not going to be a sweep. They're just not.
no, no, I don't see that either. Well, from a team that we're talking about going far in the NBA playoffs to teams that I don't know how else to put it, but these guys just don't have an effing clue. Once again, the Washington Wizards and the Sacramento Kings will be missing the playoffs. And the Sacramento Kings, especially, are a sad story in my opinion. Have a brand new stadium. They've been struggling to get a stadium for years. They finally got one of the more state-of-the-art stadiums in the league. There was talks about them possibly moving to Seattle, and the Seattle Supersonics coming back there, which I think would have been pretty interesting. And I do believe a team belongs in Seattle, but that's another topic for another day. But I don't know about you, Montana. I scratch my head at what both Sacramento Kings, and the Washington Wizards are doing. Poor Bradley Beal, but these teams are just stuck in neutral. Are they ever going to get out of their own way?
So the Wizards are a team that I really truly thought they were starting to do that with some of those pickups they got this year. I thought that, Kuzma, KCP, they really picked up some players, but then they traded some away before the deadline. They did some head scratching moves that I thought, like, you're a team that is sitting decent. Like, they were a team that at one point, it was early in the season, but they were a top 5 team, bumped slowly down as the season progressed. I think that towards like December, maybe they were closer to like 8th, 9th, and then they just kept dropping. I will say the Wizards are a team that are looking for their next John Wall. We saw them pick up Westbrook last season, and he had a decent campaign with them. Again, hey, it took me 51 minutes to talk about Westbrook, so we're improving. It's starting to be less and less. It's taking me more time to get to Westbrook, but no, and they did get that spot, and they played the 76ers in the playoffs last year. Obviously, 76ers had their way with them. It wasn't a problem for them, but you had a team. I think that the problem with Washington is they haven't had a solid team since John Wall left. They haven't had a team that has really been formed. So they keep throwing all these players around, trying to do this, do that. At one point it was Dwight Howard and Isaiah Thomas. I mean, they're just throwing all these players together, and then they have a young core, but the young core seems to always be changing. They're trading players away. They're doing this, they're doing that. They need to get up. The front office is what needs to change. I think that that whole organization is just going like on the downward spiral, and they're not looking like they're going to improve. And even when I thought they might be at the beginning of this NBA season, they really proved towards the end that they're the same Washington Wizards we've seen. Granted, last season they did make the playoffs on a Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal led team that was pretty fun to watch. They didn't have success in the playoffs, but they did have success in at least making the playoffs. Obviously, different story this season, but the Kings, I mean, they haven't made the playoffs in so many years. They haven't even made the play. I mean, they've not had a player like the Wizards have had with John Wall or with, Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal. They haven't had anyone. The Kings are a team that have underperformed, and then the really talented players they have had have left and had so much more success. So, the Kings, despite their very successful campaign early 2000s, have never really been a team that anyone has feared or like wanted to go play for. Yeah, they're out there, California, but when we think about California teams, I don't even think about them in that. We've got Clippers, Warriors, the Kings almost seem like they're in their own different place. They're not even on the same. They're just a team that always underperforms. But the Wizards, I will say, I was very disappointed because I thought after last season, with some of the success they started to have, that they were really going to be a team that could turn it around. But I think that Wizards team, their problems are they're trying to plug all these pieces in short term. They're not really looking towards the future. And then this Kings team, yeah, they've got young talent, but, they're not really growing that young talent correctly, and they're not getting any big name players to help grow that talent on that end of it either.
No.
They're not getting any free agent, they're not getting anyone.
So I will say a couple of things. I don't understand what either one of these teams is doing. I think the Wizards are closer to contending and making the playoffs than the Kings are. Last time the Kings made the playoffs was the 2005-2006 season, so it's been quite some time. The Kings, so actually the Sacramento Kings do have one team in their history that I thought was one of the best teams that never won a championship, and that was their 01-02 team with Chris Webber, Peja Stojakovic, Mike Bibby. Those were fun teams to watch. And that Arco Arena, watching those playoffs with the cowbells, I mean, when I think of cowbells, I think of Will Ferrell and SNL, and Christopher Walken, and I think of those early 2000s Sacramento King teams. Since then, they've been a dud. They've made some questionable front office moves. They had a chance to draft Luka Doncic, didn't do it. They had Marvin Bagley, didn't use him properly, in my opinion. They've had talented guys come in via the draft. They just haven't used them correctly, or whether it be bad coaching. They had Luke Walton for a while. I'm not really sure what happened there, but they've either missed on the right guy in the draft, or they've drafted young guys that have promise and they've traded him away, like a Tyrese Halliburton this year. Now, granted, they got Domantas Sabonis. Is he going to want to re-sign with Sacramento? I wouldn't. Like, where's that team going? So I think that the Sacramento Kings are one of those teams, despite them getting that new stadium that community has been struggling for and fearing that they'd lose out on, and even having the team move out of Sacramento. Despite that, they just have not been able to get out of their own way. They had DeMarcus Cousins, decided to trade him away. And that was before DeMarcus Cousins got hurt, and he was a top 10 NBA player. So, the Kings have no one to blame for themselves, and I don't see them getting out of their own way or making any noise, or I think they're going to be stuck as NBA doormats for a while now, unfortunately. And those are some great fans out there, especially when they're good. The Wizards, can you tell me the name of their coach? No. Okay.
No.
I had to look it up, to be honest with you, and it's Wes Unseld Jr. and the son of former Bullets legend Wes Unseld. I completely forgot about that. But anyway, that the point I'm making is that's how irrelevant they've been. And Bradley Beal has been one of the top guards in the NBA for years, and I think they're wasting his career away. Beal has continued to say over the years that he wants to remain in Washington. He's committed to staying there and building a winner there. But I think he needs to look elsewhere. I think he needs to request a trade and get his ass out of there. But if he does choose to stay, the onus has to be on management to put pieces around him. They just traded for Kristaps Porzingis, which, okay, guy's really good at being tall and shooting three-pointers. Doesn't necessarily mean he makes them, but at 7'3", he decides to shoot from 30 feet out. Great. It's a great skill to have as a big man, but get on the block more, defend, get a rebound or two, And to his credit, he has played a little bit better in Washington, but is he a fit there? I don't know. Them picking up Kyle Kuzma and KCP, I think the Kuzma pickup, for Kuzma was needed to revitalize his career and give himself a chance. I think he's a player. Denny Avdia has not panned out the way that they thought when they drafted him, I believe, last year as a lottery pick. But, they're closer. It's just, I think that they need another player or two. They had Westbrook last year, traded him away. But, the Wizards continue to be head scratching. No one seems to even care about them outside of Washington. We couldn't even tell you who their coach was. So why should anybody else care about them?
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think Washington's closer, especially since they just had that playoff berth last season. Now, it was very short-lived, but, they competed against the 76ers in every game they played against them. They weren't getting blown out. Westbrook and Bradley Beal had some really solid games, and some of the players they had around them really played well as well. So I think that Washington took one step forward and 2 steps back. Sacramento just keeps taking 2 steps back each season. So
they're just doing the moonwalk. They just keep going backwards.
They are. That's what they're doing. And like we said, they've either had head scratching draft, picks. They could have had Luka. Imagine plugging Luka into almost any NBA team, and you can see him already improving. So having him, because he went to a Mavs team that was starting to kind of go on the downhill. Nowinski was done.
Dirk was retiring.
He was, and even his last few seasons, he wasn't Dirk, and he was starting to get a lot older. And obviously, as players age, not every player can be LeBron and play like he does at his age, and there's that. But or even Kevin Durant, Kevin's in his 30s, Durant's in his 30s now, and he's still a bucket. Obviously different way to play position than Dirk, but still, the Mavs were kind of on that downhill slope, and then Luka came and they kind of were revitalized right away. So honestly, I think the Kings either don't use the talent they have correctly, or they trade them away too soon, or they don't pick the right people. So the Kings are a team that are going to be I'd like his doormat for. I don't see them making the playoffs for the next 2-3 seasons. I really don't. Maybe they'll make some moves and do something. But this Washington team, I definitely can see if they can get a team around Beal or ship him away, get someone else in, totally, redo that thing if that's
Sure.
needed. But the Wizards are definitely a lot closer. But those teams are really going nowhere at the end of the day. They're kind of
Yeah.
in the same category. The Wizards are just a little bit ahead of them.
Well, if you have any friends that are Sacramento Kings fans, especially, you might want to call up on them and do a wellness check on them. See if they even still know who the Sacramento Kings are. Maybe same goes for Washington, but it might maybe not be as bad. Well, we hope you've enjoyed episode 3 of Well Beyond the Arc. Like I mentioned earlier, please subscribe to the Yankee and Brit Sports Group. You can catch us on there on YouTube, Spotify, and Twitch, among other social media platforms. And in addition to that, please visit my blog, thesportspageblog.com. Just released a blog a couple days ago about Russell Westbrook and whether or not it's fair that he has been made the main scapegoat. Montana also has another podcast here. Montana, do you want to plug that in here real quick?
So I've got a little show. It's the Connor and Heffernan Show. We're currently on Spotify, Amazon Music. Like I've said the last few episodes, still figuring out Apple. Hopefully going to get my editor. He's going to try to get us set up on that. But you can find us at the Connor and Heffernan Show, currently on Podbean, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And hopefully I can add Apple in. Hopefully next episode I can say, oh, now we're on Apple too. But I don't know. It's not looking great right now, but we'll hope to get on Apple as soon as possible.
Well, hopefully you get that figured out. Well, hope you guys join us next week here. We'll be deep in the NBA playoffs here, talking about some contending teams. Until then, kids, remember that Hungary is not a country, but Hungary is. So long, everybody.